Direct News TV. February 29, 2024. Call it by its name: How Hateful Rhetoric Feeds Anti-Palestinian Violence in the U.S. Burlington, Vermont, with Israel waging war in the Gaza Strip and violence reaching new heights in the occupied West Bank, Hisham al-Wartani's family thought he would be safer in the United States. That's why, instead of going to the West Bank for Thanksgiving break, the 20-year-old Palestinian student and his two childhood friends decided to spend the U.S. holiday with relatives in the small northeastern state of Vermont. It's also why al-Wartani's uncle, Rich Price, didn't think too much of the convoy of police cars that screamed past his house, sirens blaring, on the evening of November 25. Al-Wartani was supposed to be out of harm's way in the quaint lakeshore city of Burlington. But a call Price received from his mother that night would remind him of the violence Palestinians face, even abroad. Hisham had called her and said, "Granny, I've been shot," Price told Al Jazeera from his dining room, where family photographs lined the walls. Large windows look out onto North Prospect, the same street where al-Wartani and his friends Kinan Abdalhamid and Tahsin Ahmad were attacked. Their families decided it was safer for them to come to Burlington, Vermont, Price said. "One of the really difficult things about this is that they came here specifically because we felt this was a safer place for them to be." The Palestinian students were wearing keffiyehs and speaking a mixture of Arabic and English when a man stepped off his porch, less than 3 blocks from Price's home, and opened fire. All 3 were injured but survived. Al-Wartani is now paralyzed from the chest down. He's doing incredible work and putting a lot of effort into his rehab, and I think it's difficult. Now he's back at Brown University. He's having to actually experience what it means to be back on that campus in a wheelchair, Price said. The attack didn't just upend al-Wartani's life, though. It also spurred fear across the country, where Palestinians and their supporters said they have faced a barrage of hateful rhetoric since Israel's military offensive in Gaza began in early October. According to Price, the dehumanization of Palestinians in the U.S. is the primary factor that fueled November's shooting. "The Palestinian struggle is one that is not told in a balanced way in this country," he said. The rhetoric of people in politics, in positions of leadership, certainly after October 7, that talked about the struggle as a struggle between good and evil is really dehumanizing and dangerous rhetoric. That's a view shared by nearly a dozen community advocates and experts who spoke to Al Jazeera for this story. They detailed how politicians, media outlets and pro-Israel groups have spent years dehumanizing and demonizing Palestinians, with sometimes deadly results. It can be difficult to determine what constitutes a hate crime, in part because bias is tricky to identify. Is a shooting like the one in Burlington anti-Palestinian? Anti-Arab? Anti-Muslim? Or some combination of those prejudices? In the Vermont case, the man arrested has pleaded not guilty, and state officials and the U.S. Department of Justice continue to examine whether to press hate crime charges. While such an investigation can take months, experts said anti-Palestinian sentiment lies at the heart of the relentless wave of hate incidents since October. Frequently, we see stuff like it's a keffiyeh that sort of starts the incident, and while that's a well-known Palestinian identifier, there's no way for us to know what's in the head of the person committing the incident, said Corey Saylor, Research and Advocacy Director at the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR. CAIR said it received 3,578 complaints related to anti-Palestinian and anti-Muslim hate incidents in the last 3 months of 2023, a 178% increase compared with a year earlier. The cases range from doxing, or posting someone's personal information online without their consent, to violent attacks. You don't get this wave if you don't have a set of biases built into society in regards to particular Arabs and Muslims, Saylor told Al Jazeera. There's a basis of hate there that has to exist for this wave that we saw in October, November, December to occur. It's looking for someone to flip the switch, essentially. The wave has coincided with a rise in hostile rhetoric against the Palestinian people, in the occupied territories, in Israel and in the diaspora. The war began on October 7 when the Palestinian group Hamas launched deadly attacks on southern Israel. In the following days, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant described Israel's military campaign as a fight against human animals as he called for Gaza, home to 2.3 million Palestinians, to be placed under strict siege. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu likewise painted the conflict as a battle between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. President Isaac Herzog also said, an entire nation of Palestinians was responsible for the Hamas attacks. Israel's defenders in the U.S. made similar comments. Some members of Congress, like Representative Brian Mast of Florida, said there were few innocent Palestinians in Gaza. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, dismissed the mounting Palestinian death toll as the price of waging war. Nearly 30,000 Palestinians have been killed since the military campaign in Gaza began. Critics have also pointed to stereotypes in U.S. media as contributing to the negative perceptions of Palestinians. For instance, an opinion column published in the Wall Street Journal in early February described Dearborn, Michigan, a city with large Palestinian and Arab American populations, as America's jihad capital. There is a direct correlation. When the rhetoric goes up, so does the hate speech, and it often leads to hate crimes, said Abed Ayoub, National Executive Director of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, ADC. In one of the most glaring examples, Palestinian activist and the ADC's West Coast director Alex Ode was killed in 1985 when the organization's California office was firebombed. The attack is believed to have been carried out by members of the far-right Jewish Defense League, but no one has been charged, leaving an open wound for the community. We've lost staff members that were killed because of the bombings from these really far, right-wing Zionist extremists. That poses a real threat, Ayoub told Al Jazeera. Ahmed Rehab, executive director of CARE's Chicago branch, said he raised the alarm in October about the volume of biased and anti-Palestinian propaganda that was pouring out of the media and the statements from elected officials. Later that same month, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy, Wadia Al-Fahim, was killed in a Chicago suburb when his family's landlord stabbed him 26 times. His mother was also severely injured. Police said they were targeted by the suspect due to them being Muslim and the ongoing Middle Eastern conflict involving Hamas and the Israelis. Rehab said the attack spurred feelings of horror in the community. This is a child stabbed 26 times by an adult, an innocent child who had done nothing to him, he told Al Jazeera. Thousands of people attended the boy's funeral in mid-October. In addition to the obvious, there is a feeling of abandonment and a feeling of being left out to dry because how do you protect against that? Rehab said. It definitely feels like a grave sense of injustice. It feels like you're alone and you don't really know what to do. These protests in the streets, for Palestine, that's not a strategy. That's people crying out for justice when every other door has been shut. For Iman Abid Thompson, a Palestinian American and director of advocacy and organizing at the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, hate-filled rhetoric allows people to fuel their own hate and violence against Palestinians. We are oftentimes used synonymously with the term terrorist, she said. These are the sorts of things that resonate with people, with U.S. white vigilantes who think that, oh, my gosh, in order to protect America, I must protect us against these sorts of terrorists. That framing, of Palestinians as terrorists, is not new, explained Evelyn El-Sultani, a professor of American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California's Dorn-Seif College. She traced that perspective back to the creation of the State of Israel in 1948 when Palestinians were painted as people you can't reason with, who are terrorists and who are anti-Semitic. That narrative continued to grow after the Arab-Israeli War of 1967 when Israel seized the West Bank, the Gaza Strip and other Arab lands. Multiple plane hijackings in the 1970s carried out by Palestinian armed groups contributed to negative perceptions of Palestinians. Then with the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 and the Iranian hostage crisis, we got the conflation of Arabs and Iranians and Muslims as all the same, al-Sultani said. By the time we got to 9/11, it was very easy to make the case that Islam writ large, Arabs writ large, were a threat to U.S. national security. Al-Sultani explained that conflating anti-Palestinian hate with Islamophobia not only erases the diversity of Palestinian society but it also gives the impression that this is a religious conflict when it is not. It is a political conflict, she said. She pointed out that, while most Palestinians are Muslim, some are Christian or Druze. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post, you won't regret it.